Few insults are as quietly devastating as boring. It does not accuse someone of cruelty or incompetence. It suggests they fail at something more basic, holding attention. In everyday life, the label often functions as a social verdict. You did not give me a reason to orient toward you. In popular discourse, solutions tend to be individualistic. Learn better stories, get hobbies, be more confident. Those suggestions are not entirely wrong, but they usually miss what is sociologically most important. Boredom and interest are relational. We are boring to someone in some setting under some norms of what counts as worth attending to. The same person can be magnetic in one group and invisible in another. That variability is not a mystery once we stop treating interestingness like a private asset and start treating it like a negotiated social value. The guiding question of this lesson is, how can sociology explain what it means to stop being boring and become interesting? And what practical changes follow from that explanation? I argue that interestingness emerges at the intersection of 1. Culturally valued knowledge and taste, 2. Interactional skill and timing, and 3. Moral expectations about authenticity and mutual recognition. Embolic interactionism emphasizes that selves are formed and evaluated in interaction, not revealed like hidden objects. Goffman's The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life is especially useful here. Social life is full of performances, but performance does not mean fake. It means we manage impressions under constraints, trying to produce a definition of the situation that others will accept. Bourdieu's work on distinction complicates the apparently neutral idea of being interesting. What counts as interesting is tied to fields, art, academia, professions, subcultures, with their own stakes. Cultural capital familiarity with legitimized tastes, styles of speech, and the right references raises the probability that others will recognize what you offer as valuable. This matters because the advice, get interesting hobbies, often means acquire the hobbies my group already respects. Reading certain books, traveling in certain ways, knowing certain bands, these are not just activities but signals. If interestingness partly tracks cultural capital, then stop being boring is not merely about inner growth. It can also become an assimilation project into middle-class norms of curiosity, articulate speech, and curated experience. Randall Collins argues that successful interactions generate emotional energy, confidence, enthusiasm, and a desire to repeat the encounter. People who are labeled interesting often function as ritual catalysts. They create focus, a topic, a story, a tension, and maintain rhythmic exchange, turn-taking, responsiveness, escalation. This suggests a subtle point. Interestingness is not only about content, having things to say, but also about coordination, how the interaction feels. Many boring moments are failures of rhythm monologues, flat affect, or anxious self-monitoring that prevents mutual build. Finally, interestingness is morally policed. Contemporary culture praises authenticity, but also expects people to be socially legible and pleasantly engaging. Hochschild's concept of emotion work, 1983, helps explain why trying to be interesting can feel exhausting. People manage not only what they say, but the emotional tone they project, warmth, enthusiasm, ease. There is a tension here. A person can be dismissed as boring for not performing enough energy, yet criticized as fake for performing too much. Interestingness is therefore not simply achieved, it is balanced. This thesis is primarily theoretical, but it is grounded in qualitative sensibilities. Rather than measuring interestingness as a trait, I treat it as a category people use in everyday judgment. To keep the analysis close to ordinary meaning, I draw on cultural materials where boring and interesting are discussed explicitly. Advice articles, workplace guidance on executive presence, and public online conversations about social anxiety and charisma. These texts are not treated as transparent truth, but as evidence of the norms people imagine they must meet. The aim is not to produce a final typology of personalities. It is to describe the social mechanisms through which interest is recognized, and then show what changes become possible once we see those mechanisms. If interestingness depends partly on cultural capital, then one practical implication is that people become more interesting by expanding the range of references they can share. But sociology pushes us to say this carefully. The goal is not to collect status objects. It is to increase interpretive overlap with multiple audiences. In practice, this looks less like pick impressive hobbies and more like cultivating a repertoire. A few domains you can speak about concretely, not just name dropping, plus some awareness of what others may value. Importantly, repertoires can be built through ordinary access points, public libraries, local events, community groups, not only expensive consumption. Still, we should not romanticize. Time, money, and education shape who can accumulate these resources without strain. A sociological twist here is that interesting often means placeable. If you can connect what you say to shared categories, this reminds me of In My Job We See, where I grew up. Others can locate you in a meaningful social map. The opposite of boring is not constant novelty. It is intelligibility plus some difference. Many advice texts treat conversation as self-expression, but conversation analysis suggests it is closer to joint labor. People who are experienced as interesting often do three mundane things. Well, they offer hooks, short, vivid details that invite questions. I almost missed my train. Because rather than abstract summaries, work was fine. They show uptake. They ask follow-ups that demonstrate they heard the specific thing, not just the general topic. This is crucial. One of the most reliable ways to seem interesting is to make the other person feel interesting. They manage turn length, not because long turns are always bad, but because long turns without audience cues become socially risky. Skilled speakers monitor feedback and adjust. From a Goffmanian angle, boring can be a mismatch in footing. Someone speaks as if delivering a report when the setting calls for play. Or they speak as if confessing intimacy when the relationship is still formal. Becoming interesting often means learning the local rules of the scene, what counts as oversharing, what counts as wit, what counts as curiosity. This also reframes social anxiety. An anxious person may have plenty of thoughts, but the interactional bandwidth is consumed by self-monitoring. The sociological point is not be confident, but that confidence is partly an outcome of repeated low-stakes interactions where one's bids for attention are met with acceptance. Social environments distribute confidence unevenly. Perhaps the most important finding from taking sociology seriously is this: there is no global court of interestingness. Fields and subcultures reward different forms of talk, humor, and knowledge. Simmel's idea that social forms shape content can be felt here. The same personal story lands differently at a family dinner, a seminar, a bar, or a gaming community. This suggests a practical strategy that is not often framed as such: context selection. People can become more interesting without changing their personality by moving towards settings where their interests are legible and valued. Someone who seems boring among status competitive peers may be lively in a group organized around shared practice: sports, volunteering, mutual aid, craft. Modern life often isolates people into thin networks. Being boring can be an artifact of not having a scene. This is also where inequality returns. Not everyone has equal access to varied scenes, and some people face stigma that reduces the generosity of audiences. Still, even within constraint, small shifts, one recurring club, one project-based community can change the interactional ecology in which a self is recognized. A sociological account makes becoming interesting seem both more achievable and more troubling. More achievable because it is not a mysterious essence. It is a set of social processes. More troubling because the demand to be interesting can become a form of discipline. Under contemporary conditions, individuals are encouraged to curate selves that are marketable in friendship, dating, and work an extension of what scholars sometimes describe as neoliberal self-fashioning. The point is not to reject growth. It is to recognize the moral stakes. If interestingness becomes an obligation, then quietness, seriousness, or even temporary depression can be treated as personal failure rather than part of human variability.